you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for, spending some of your day with us.
Happy to do it.
Perfect. And so, yeah, we'll kind of let it go till about like 2 after. I'll jump into like some introductions and then we'll pass it over and get our workshop started. Okay.
Great. We're going to have some fun stuff for you today.
Yeah. Yeah. And all like the pre-prep meetings that Dana and I have had, we've just been like laughing and like goofing off and like having a good time. So it's going to be a really like fun, energetic event as well. And y'all are welcome to, if you want to have like your cameras open and like mic'd up during the session, you're completely welcome to as well. It should be like a nice little size group. So like where there's a good amount of faces, but you don't feel like we're like competing to like be seen on the screen. So
well, since I'm the only one, well, I guess I'm not the only one without my camera. I'll just say hello. I'm a little under the weather, so apologies for not showing my face right now.
No, we're happy to have you in any state.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. I'm excited for this. I appreciate you having it.
Well, yeah, well, thank you for still joining us while you're under the weather. But that, that's kind of one of the great things about all these virtual events. You're like, you don't really feel like, being the full dressed up self or, you're a little under the weather. You still have access to it.
Exactly. No need to get fancy.
Yeah. All right. Well, sounds good. Seems like we got a little good group going right now. So I'm going to go ahead and get us kicked off. But, first, thank you so much to Dana for coming and, getting connected with me. I know that we got connected with, who introduced us again?
So Dee introduced us.
Dee, yeah. So Dee introduced us. She's actually another like workshop facilitator, and I have an event coming up with her in September. So also be out on the lookout for that event. It should be on psychologically safe spaces, so that it can like help you innovate as well. So that should be a really cool topic. I'm very excited about that. So yeah, thanks to Dee who introduced us. And anyway, before we get started, I see a lot of familiar faces, but for those who this is like your first Breaking the Glass event, I'm the partnerships manager for Breaking the Glass. We partner with tech companies and nonprofits to provide free personalized programming on diversity, inclusion, and women's career development topics. We have provided webinars and workshops for our partners like Dell, IBM, and Charter Communications. We're very collaborative. We love all sorts of new projects and opportunities. So if this is something that you'd be interested in getting involved in, either as hosting us to your community group, being a speaker, a workshop leader, or just like continuing to, share our programming, I'm going to be dropping my contact information in the chat. So feel free to reach out, add me on LinkedIn. I'd love to like have y'all be a part of like my digital community as well. Before we get started, this workshop is going to provide some spaces to engage and ask questions. You've all committed to being here for an hour, so you might as well make the most of it and, be an active participant as well. So again, we really appreciate your time, and I'm going to go ahead and let Dana introduce herself, and I'm going to close down a little bit and see you all at the end of the program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you for Breaking the Glass, for bringing such great programming and such great support to a community that I believe so wholeheartedly in. And it's really my pleasure to join you guys today and share a little bit about the 5 Ds of planning your day. I wanted to just give you guys an outline of kind of the things that we'd be going over. doing a little intro, which is this part. We'll talk about a little prep that we'll want to do before we dive into our 5Ds. And then we'll talk about what we want to do to kind of maintain some of the new thinking and systems that we've done. And then spoiler alert, I'm going to give you guys some information if you want to talk more with me. So who I am, I'm a corporate coach, and I have been since about 2016, certified by the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. That's a mouthful. But before that, I've spent about 25 plus years in corporate and agency environments. And I wore many hats during that time period, but one of the things that I really bring with me today is that I was a little bit of a process and productivity junkie. So I love the ability to come into places and just make things easier for people. And part of that is process and tips, some of which we're going to cover today. But a big part of that is also making sure that people are working on the right things. We have limited time, and we have a lot of things that we want to be doing with our time to really make us live full and happy lives. And so making sure that we're looking at kind of both of those levers that we can pull, I think is really important. I'm going to throw in some tips along the way as we're doing this. And I wanted to start us out with this here. So I'm going to share with you some systems and some processes, and some of those are going to resonate with you and some of them maybe won't. And so there's kind of two sides of thinking about this, and I think you can support them both. So one is do what works for you. So everybody's going to want to do things a little bit differently. Everybody's going to think a little bit differently. And so you're going to always want to keep that in mind as you're deciding how you want to do things. But what you also want to look at is that what got you here isn't going to get you there. And so if what you're doing right now isn't working, or could just work better, you might want to try on some things that might not feel totally natural at first to see what might work for you. And so that's just my invitation to, as we're going through this, you may want to be like, everything she said is amazing, and I'm going to start doing it. Or you may want to pick a couple nuggets that you're like, great, here's this piece that I'm really going to focus on. But I do really encourage you to try something new and just try it on. And with that, let's talk a little bit about getting started. So the first thing we're going to look at is, do you know what you have to do? So there's a lot of people who talk about this, and I think the key concept here is that it's really important to get all the information down. We can only keep, I think, 3 things, maybe 4 things in our head at a given time, and we're actually not in control of which 3 things are in our head. And so in order to give ourselves a break, we want to start training our brain that we can get things down and get them out of our minds. We have a system, we're going to start trusting that system. And so the first thing we want to do is get everything down. And so look at all your lists. I'm a little bit of a list junkie. I know there are other people who have multiple lists in multiple places, and this would be an opportunity to really think about where you have information written down. Are you a Post-it person? Do you have things in your calendar? Do you have things in your digital to-do list? As we're pulling all this information together, there may be areas where you still want to keep stuff separate. So for example, you may want to have your personal list and your professional list separate, which I think as long as that works for you, that's great. But for the processes that we're going to go through, I would invite you to look at all of your life together. So as you're figuring out what's important for you, it's really important to know really that whole spectrum and that whole plate. And at the end of the day, we may keep them separate. There are things where I have lists of books to read. I'm not necessarily going to include that in my main list, but I'm going to acknowledge that I have that as a list, and that's actually a to-do list. I'm not getting to all those books, but they're there so that they're being taken care of somewhere. I do invite you to go digital. I think most people are digital at this point, but there's just a few really key perks to having things someplace that's cloud-based. So one is no matter where you are, you can access that information and you can jot down stuff that comes to you. So I am always thinking about stuff at the most inopportune times, and the easier it is for me to get it down in those systems, the easier it's going to be. And then it's also way, way easier to reorganize your list. So if you're writing things down on a regular basis, you know, that's time that it needs to take you. I will confess, I have my list digital, but I do write down key things that I want to do on a notepad. I like the pen to paper. I like to have that information available. And there's something about remembering it with that physical form of writing that for me really works. So as we're getting all this information down, don't worry about categorizing it, and don't worry about it being fancy. So I happen to use Evernote as my list making app. I don't use the fancy features very much on it. I really use it as a way that I can organize my list into a couple different areas and again, have those available. But if you want to use notes, there's tons of apps that you can use on those. Some people get into the Asanas and the Trellos. We're not going to talk at that level today. It's really about getting all the information down. The other thing that we want to look at as we're looking at this information is this just a specific task? Is this a bigger project that's going to have more than one task level with it? And is this something recurring? It's just helpful when we go to categorize to think if those are things that we really want to be thinking about as we're doing it. And so before we move into our Ds, I wanted to give you a tip here. This is something that comes up a lot. We're going to talk about taking control of the things that you have to do, but not everybody has 100% control over everything that's on their plate. We have bosses, we have clients, we have people who are telling us what to do. And so I wanted to give you a few tips for how to think of those situations. So one is, you'd be surprised how much control you really do have. So a lot of times there's a general objective of what you're trying to accomplish, but the things that you do to get there are really within your control. And so think through that and think about what the best way for you to do those is. If you're negotiating with your manager, this is a great tool to start learning how to really manage up, which is a great skill when you're working with other people. And if you're going in and you're posing a solution and you're posing the logic for why certain things should be managed a certain way, they're really going to appreciate that thinking. And then as you have that discussion, you can jointly agree about really what's important, how is the right way to get it done. And again, if there's any trade-offs that you're going to be doing, for example, by deciding to do one thing and not doing another, everybody's on the same page and you're not ending up later on down the road being like, I didn't have time to do that other thing because we decided this was important. So you're having those conversations up front. And then, of course, there are tons of areas in your life that you have total control over. And so I encourage you to really think about how you want to be spending your time, where you want to be spending your time, and really taking the control to make that work best for you. So we're about to head into delete, which is our first D. But I just wanted to pause here and see if anybody had any questions before we dive in. And feel free as we go along. I'll pause after each of these to see if there's any information that we want to go. But if you have questions that are coming up along the way, feel free to drop them into the chat or hold them and we'll make sure that we get to each of these. All right, delete. This is the big one, and this is where we start. So how many of you have actually finished your to-do lists? Give me a shout out if you're a finisher, because I'm impressed and we're going to need to talk. But for the rest of us out there, our to-do list is one of those things that is a mounting list of things that we're going to get to, and we probably don't always. And there are probably things, and again, we're fixing this, where we're spending time on things that aren't even on our to-do list, and we're not getting to the things that we decided that were really important for us. And so in order to acknowledge this, we need to be realistic. We are not going to get to everything. And so we want to be the ones who are proactively deciding that these are the things that we want to do. And what that means is making some hard choices, that there's some things that we're not going to do. And so if I can proactively say that that's something that I'm not going to do, it gets it out of my mind. I don't need to keep thinking about it. It gets it off of my kind of doing it phase, where I'm taking time and energy from other things that I've decided are more important and more critical for me to move forward on. So how do you decide what to delete? So what isn't aligned with your goals? What doesn't make an impact? So I'm spending a lot of time on that and I'm not getting a lot of payoff from it. What have you put off from week to week to week? Sometimes we may not delete the entire task, but we may look at reducing the size and scope of it. So what's your MVP? In product management, we talk about this a lot. It's your minimum viable product. And so is there a small version of this that I can get out the door, that I can get done, and I can cross it off my list? And then I can decide, okay, yeah, now I want to go back and I want to do the more robust version. I want to do more on this. This is important to me. Or I could decide, great, that actually satisfied everything I needed to do. And now I can move on and look at other things. And so a little reminder that this also includes meetings. We spend so much of our time in meetings. And again, this is one of those things we don't have total control over, but we do have some. And so just taking a fresh perspective and a fresh look at your schedule and looking, where am I spending my time? And where is the most efficient place for me to be? And sometimes that means some of us have calendars that other people put meetings on. Sometimes that means just clarifying. So it's helpful in those instances to make sure that you really understand what's the purpose of this meeting and what is my purpose of being in this meeting? What is the most valuable use of my time? Because maybe it would be more efficient for me to just get notes. Like, I need to know what's going on, but I actually don't need to provide information or be a part of that decision-making process. And that can also be a conversation that you have with your manager, where you're deciding, like, okay, I need time in my schedule to do this work. So how do we start getting some of these meetings down to a point where it's realistic? And this is something a lot of departments spend a lot of time on. So there's no simple solutions for this. But again, I just think it's a great area while we're looking at where we're spending our time holistically. We're going to start to look at our calendar a little bit later. And so that's a really important step. All right, our tip on delete. This is the hardest, but it's the most important step. So I would encourage everybody right now to think of one thing on your list that you could delete. You don't have to commit to deleting it, but think of one thing that maybe you're just not going to do. It's not a good use of your time in the grand scope of things. And then I invite you, as you continue to go through this process and spend some more time really thinking and reflecting about where you're doing that, to just return to this step. So you can return to all the 5 Ds again and again to use as a filter moving forward. But delete is one of those decisions. I dropped a project off of my list this week that was something I really wanted to do, but I realized it wasn't a good use. And again, by proactively removing that from my list, I got a lot more stuff of the stuff that I've been putting off done. And so this is something that, again, I think we'll want to return to again and again. All right, any questions before we move to our next D? Anybody starting to think of any things that they're going to delete? All right, I'll invite you guys to keep percolating while we move on to defer. So does this need to be done now, is the basic question that we're doing here. So I've got this huge list of everything that I need to do. I've deleted the things that I have decided are not going to be on my list anymore, and I'm going to let them go. But now I'm going to take my list and I'm going to divide it into things that I'm actively going to do and the things that I'm going to defer. And again, a lot of you who are doing sprints and product managing, think of this as the backlog. So I want to keep track of it. I want to get it off my head, onto my paper. But I know that this isn't something that I actively need to be thinking of now. And so I want to give myself permission to put this on the defer list. And so I like to use a time frame of 1 month. And so I do kind of a monthly planning so that I go back and I look at my list again and I bring things in. So I do a little backlog grooming to bring my tasks in. And so this is something that you think about, okay, over the next month, what's realistic on my to-do list? And so some of the things that, again, we can think of that for deferring is, it was one of those things that probably I could have deleted, but I'm not ready to. That's too big of a step. So I'm going to put it on defer, and I'm just not going to think about it for now. If I am waiting for other steps and dependencies, but again, I don't want to lose track of this piece. If there's too much stuff in flux and I'm thinking about it, that's a good item to defer. And again, if it's something that's important and I want to make sure I'm keeping on there, but it's not urgent, I'm also going to want to defer that. And the tip here is this is not procrastination. So the definition that I pull for procrastination here is putting off something intentionally that you should be doing. And so what we're doing is we're deciding that we shouldn't be doing this right now. This is not where we should be spending our time. And so this gives us the freedom to not feel bad about not thinking about those things and not doing those things. Any questions before we move to the next D? All right. Our next D is digitize. Okay, so this step is, can this be automated? And I'm using digitize a little bit loosely because it's a D, and so we like to remember those things. But basically what we're just thinking about, is there a way that this can be more efficient? So some examples that I have in here is using key commands on your phone. So I, for some reason, am entering my email address repeatedly, and typing that is just the bane of my existence for some reason. So I have a key command. I input 3 keys and I hit enter and it's in. If there is information that people are coming to you on a regular basis for, can you save that information in an email template? Or I save some things in Evernote that I just cut and paste and send to people over and over again. Can you post things on an intranet or your website if it's public facing? Can you make a video that explains it, or do a checklist so that you've got all that information in that process along the way? I was just talking to one of my clients recently about file namings, file systems and naming conventions. So they were saying that they spend a lot of time going through that, not as much for internal documents, but for when they're sharing things. And I know we've all received a final attachment. And then when you're going to find the most recent version, it's a challenge and it just takes you time. So these are some of the areas that we think about where it's like, I could just be more efficient here. I could figure out a way to make this system not be so time consuming and not take up so much of my time. And so the tip here, again, is start paying attention. What are the things that I'm doing repeatedly? And is there a way that I can make those easier for me? Is there a way I can make it faster? And think about that as you're thinking about digitizing. I'm not thinking about going crazy and making a whole process for something that's simple to do. So you want to weigh that, but I'm just saying we can create some efficiencies with technology or with just gathering the information. Any questions on digitize? All right. We have deleted. Email templates are amazing. I think that is such a great tip. And the more you can start to think about the stuff that you're doing over and over again is great. So we've deleted the information we're not going to work on. We've deferred the information that we don't need to work on right now. We've made the stuff on our list as easy as possible. And now we need to ask ourselves, do we really need to be the ones to do it? And I think here, again, a lot of people are hesitant to delegate. So one is nobody's as good at doing it as I am, which may be the case, but also one, maybe it doesn't matter that it's as good because if you can get it off your plate, but also by giving it to somebody else who has more dedicated time to do it, when I'm kind of doing it in my side over here, they actually can probably do a better job and take it on and really make this something that is given full dedication. And so it can be a great use of other people's time. Another issue people have is that it'll take me longer to teach somebody than it'll take me to do it myself. And while sometimes this is true, and there is an investment to get other people up to speed on things, the investment really pays off. And you'll find that for the littlest tasks that you can hand off to somebody, there's invariably like 12 questions that come back about that task. And another task that comes in that's almost like that task. And if you had handed off that first one, then you can start to get other people trained to do that and to take that burden off. The other issue is I don't have anybody to delegate to. And again, this could be the case, but when you look at professionally, what your team is supposed to be working on, what you're supposed to be working on, sometimes other people have downtime. And so there's ways that you can delegate. Sometimes there are people on other teams who have downtime when you're slammed. And so if you start to think about those things that you can hand off, and again, we're going to practice our managing up, where we're going to talk to our managers about like, where is the best use of my time? Maybe there are some of those things that you can hand off, and maybe your team is really at the point where it does make sense to bring somebody in and your manager is going to agree to that. So sometimes people are also afraid to give things away. They feel like if I stop doing this, it's going to lose some of the importance of my job. And so as we're doing this, we're thinking about what's important for me to do, certainly, but we're also not thinking of redundancy as a bad word. So I don't know how many times I've had people who have not been able to take a sick day. I mean, they've been home sick, but they've had to work because there was literally nobody else who could do what they were doing. People who work on vacations. Vacations are so important. So even if you're not able to totally hand off work, make sure that there are other people who know how to do this so that you're doing it and continue to think about where it makes sense to hand those things off. Okay, so some of the things that you've got to delegate professionally. Again, we've got projects, we've got parts of projects. In your personal life, sometimes your personal life is just busy. And so it may make sense for you to delegate things like house cleaning, food delivery, takeout. I'm having my groceries delivered later because I did not have a chance to go to the store today. In your social life, maybe you're the one who's always coordinating plans and picking out the next restaurant. And sometimes you like that, but sometimes you're busy and people still kind of assume that you're the one that's going to do it. And so those are ways that you can really think about, okay, what are some of the things that I can do? And for the question about everyone being as insanely overworked as you are, that is a reality. And I totally hear you on that. And so I think this is one of the areas where it's important to really have that open conversation with your team and with your manager about where the team's time should be spent and where it shouldn't be spent. I know none of us like to say no. It's like we just have to do all this work. We have to. But there would come a point when the amount of work that comes in would be too much for you to take. And you would say no. And so what if we just start looking at those set points a little bit earlier and start thinking about ways that we can make our team work level more manageable? Because new stuff's going to keep coming in. And we also need to allow for those new things that are urgent that we'll have to do to come in and also to be trade-offs. And so it is one of the most challenging pieces. And so I would encourage you as much as possible to have really an open dialogue and really start thinking about troubleshooting as a team to start figuring out, really where it's possible to hand off some of those pieces. Or again, go back to our delete and defer. And so some tips that I have on delegating. So we've decided that we want to delegate. And so we want to be clear. So what is the process? What is the timing? What are the dependencies? And most importantly, what is the end result that we're expecting to have on this? You should document the process so that you only have to kind of train the person once. And if you haven't already documented the process, as you're training that person, have them document the process. So that means that you're going to have that. Again, whether it's a quick Google Doc, whether it's a video, people are doing screen caps for stuff that can be really helpful. So those are all ways that you can make sure that this is just going to ease it moving forward. And knowing, particularly as you're first starting to hand stuff off, that there is more of the possibility for there to be a disconnect about what's done. Make sure that you're just scheduling some check-ins, but that you're aware of when you're planning on checking in and what you're expecting to have completed at that time, so that again, you're all on the same page. But don't micromanage. So this is, it's not good for your time. The reason you're handing this off is because you don't want to spend the time on it, but it's also really demoralizing for the person that's doing it. So again, it's about setting the expectations, about really understanding what they're doing and making sure that you're having those check-ins. So any more questions before we move to our final D? All right, you guys, are you ready? Do. So we have deleted, we have deferred, we have digitized, we have delegated. And so now what's on our list is the stuff that we're actually going to do. Okay, so some tips here on doing is first, now we weren't prioritizing or categorizing our list before, but now we want to. So what's most important? What are some things that kind of naturally group together as we're doing that? We've got this on our digital to-do list, so it's really easy to move stuff around. Thinking about for each of these, we've already narrowed it down to what our MVP is, but think about for this month that I'm going to be working on it, because I'm thinking about this month, is there a minimum goal that I want to do on this piece? And is there a stretch goal? So what is the minimum that would make me feel like I need to have this done? And then what are some things where, depending on how the month goes, I could really take it to the next level and it can stretch. And I've thought about those ahead of time so that, again, there's a lever I can pull as things start to get busier or start to get lighter. Maybe I have a delay for something. I do encourage people to make your goals and your tasks really concrete and specific. It just significantly increases the fact that you're going to get it done. And so I do loosely use the SMART goals. And so that is specific, measurable, so I know when it's done. It's achievable, so that is realistic. It is relevant, and this goes back to my why. This is something that I want is important to me, and it's time-based. And so what is the time frame that I'm going to get this done? And again, if this is a bigger project, what is the piece that I'm expecting to have done this month? And so I want to be able to be really specific about where I'm going to be on my goals. And as I'm doing this, I want to start estimating the amount of time this stuff is going to take, because I'm going to need to figure out what's realistic on all these pieces and if I need to do anything along the way. What has deadlines? So what is not moving? What, or if any, dependencies are there? Am I waiting for other people? Do I need supplies? Is this something I got to go somewhere for? So I want to start calculating all of that into the pieces that I'm doing. I also want to encourage everybody to really start using your calendars. So some people are so extreme on this that they don't even believe in to-do lists. Like, if it's not on your calendar, it is not a thing that's going to happen. So I like to be a little looser about it. I like to do some time blocking. I do like to have my to-do list, and so I know what I can move around in those pieces. I encourage you to, again, while we're doing this, we've got our digital calendar. So again, these time blocks are easy to move as things shift around, but we've got our time estimates. We want to overestimate the amount of time it's going to take because real life gets in there. We want to leave some gaps. And part of that are planned gaps. Like, here's my buffer time for the stuff that I don't get done. This is the time block that I'm going to get that stuff in. And some of that is, again, some of us are in positions where people are scheduling time on our calendars. And so think about how you want to handle that. If other people can see what's on your calendars, do you want to make that to look very official? Do you want to just block it out as working time so that other people know you're working? But then again, if they really need to meet with you during that time period, they can talk to you and you can rearrange that. But I do think it's really important to make sure that those are on there. Batching tasks. So I use the Pomodoro technique a lot, and this is really common, but it's actually really simple. It's 25-minute blocks of time, and then you take a 5-minute break. And then you take longer breaks in between there. And so what this helps for a number of reasons. One is sometimes I use it for a dedicated task where I need to think. And sometimes I use it just because I've got a lot of miscellaneous tasks. And rather than interrupting everything that I'm doing throughout the day to do these miscellaneous tasks, I'll have a set amount of time to do those. And so I set a timer, which is part of the Pomodoro technique. And it means I start to focus. The timer has started for some reason that lets me get started right away. And it also helps me stop distractions because I got 25 minutes and I'm working on this thing. And then I'll get to those little distractions here and there. And yes, you want to make sure that you're scheduling your breaks and your lunch breaks. Those are so important and so realistic to how we need to spend our days. And Jean, I would be happy to share a copy of this presentation. I'll make a little PDF of it after the fact and get it to Elizabeth to share out so that everybody can have kind of all of these tips to take with them. Absolutely. The other thing that we want to think about as we are going through our day is what time of day is best for the right type of work. Some people like to focus in the mornings. Me, not so much. I need to focus in the afternoons. And so for me, mornings are more for meetings and things that I can chat on, whereas I have heads down time in the afternoon. Some people are totally opposite. And there's also the need to switch gears. So if I'm doing a lot of presentations, I'm not going to try and schedule those back to back. If I'm doing a lot of deep thinking after I'm doing that project, I'm a little burnout on that, but I'm not done for the day. And so if I switch gears and I start doing some of those miscellaneous tasks, returning some emails, that's something that doesn't take as much headspace potentially. And so by balancing those back to back on how I'm spending my day, I can learn to be just more efficient with my energy and my time. All right, we've got all our list. We've got our dues for the month. We've looked at our calendar. We've figured out what we're going to do when, what our pieces are. So the last piece to do, other than I'm going to give you some tips, is what I'm planning realistic? So now that I've got all those pieces planned out, is that a realistic amount of things that I'm going to do this month? Knowing that new things are going to come in, knowing that I have day-to-day stuff, knowing that I'm probably underestimating a couple things. What do I want to do now to reset to make sure that I'm going to be successful with what I know that I really want to accomplish this month? And this is one of my favorite questions. It's a super coachy question. What's going to get in my way? So if I want to start going to the gym and I've got it planned on my schedule, but if I start thinking about it realistically, it's like, well, what happens if I'm planning on going to the gym in the evenings is I end up working a little bit late and then I get hungry. Or people are starting to meet again. And so if a friend wants to go meet for happy hour, yes, I want to go for happy hour and I might blow off the gym. And so what does that mean for me? So for me, that might be like, okay, I've got, as long as I go to the gym 3 nights a week, then that's okay for me. But if I really don't get to the gym, I'm going to go to the gym in the morning the next day, even though I hate getting up early and going to the gym, but that's important to me. And so I've already thought that through. And so if you've got a lot of stuff on your calendar and you know you come in and you immediately get torn in doing emails and responding to things, is that something you need to allow time for? Or is that something you can block off and say, no, I'm going to work for half an hour. I'm going to work for a Pomodoro, and I'm going to get some stuff done before I start responding to email. Does my boss come in and totally discombobulate what I'm doing with my day with some erratic requests? Is that something that happens on a regular basis? And so what are some of the things that I can proactively do to get in front of those things? All right, so here are some extra tips for our making it happen. So accountability. So some people really need accountability in their schedule. They need a deadline. And so if you don't have a deadline on those things, but it's something that's still important and you want to work on, figure out a way to make a deadline. Sometimes it can be working with a friend, other things that you are doing to make it in your day. I had a phase when I was trying to do some writing and I literally was emailing my friend every day just to tell them that I did the writing. It was something I've been putting off, but something I wanted to spend time on. And by knowing that I had said that I was going to do that, it gave me a deadline where I was going to do it. So start thinking about ways like that where you can have some of those checks and balances in your day, if that's helpful to you. Rewards. So I love a reward. So if I've had my act together all week and done stuff, then I might treat myself and I might plan on that. For some of my more tedious tasks, I might do some gamification. So Pomodoros are kind of a way that I do that sometimes. So if I'm doing blog posts, for me, it's kind of a challenge to see if I can time myself to get it done with 1 Pomodoro. And so that becomes something where it's like, I just don't want to spend any more time on it than that. It's not worth it to me. And so there's ways that I think of that I make it more fun. And I start to challenge myself to seeing how many of those, can I get my inbox to 0? I cannot. Another tip on this is to eat the frog. So that's a term a lot of people have heard. And what that means is you just want to do your big, ugly task. Not that frogs are not adorable, but you do want to do that big thing that's important first thing. And so a lot of times the earlier we do things in our day, the less likely we are to get off track with those other pieces. And so by making a plan to do it first thing, that can be a way to make sure that we're making progress on some of those things that we want to spend time on. Habits. I'm a huge fan of all the science of habits. And so like 80% of what we do during the day is stuff that we don't even think about. We just do it. And so if you can start to understand the way the brain really works, and you can start to leverage that science to make things just easy so that you're automatically doing those things. And it does require a little training. But as you start to understand that it makes things a lot easier. And the last tip I would give on this is self-care. So a lot of us think by just working harder and longer, we will get more done. And as a coach, the first thing I deal with people on oftentimes is that they're not taking care of themselves. And so a lot of people are burnout and a lot of people are frazzled. And this is really one of those areas where investing that time in yourself really does pay off. By taking the time away, those vacations, those lunch breaks, those snack times, by going to the gym, by getting enough sleep, by drinking water, by eating right, it's actually going to make you more productive and more able to focus and get things done. And so that is a tip that I make sure that everyone is really thinking about as they're thinking about holistically, what's on my to-do list and where am I spending my time? So any questions before we move to a little maintenance? All right. Okay, so we've gone through our huge list. We've done our 5 Ds. We've got our month piece, but how do I make this manageable? This is one of those areas where, again, I don't want to add process for process sake. This is something that you should be able to do. Again, the first time you start looking through your to-do list, it might take a little bit longer, but you might not even go through the whole thing the first time. You might just start to think of it with this lens. But as you start thinking of it with this lens, you are going to want to have some times that you're checking in and you're investing to make sure that you're keeping yourself on the rails and you're saving yourself time in the long run. So I would recommend that you put on your calendar, as we're doing our time, week reviews. I spend about 25 minutes, Pomodoro, on a week review every week. I used to do this on Fridays, but now because I've been doing some working on Sundays, I do this Sunday night. And I do it while I'm watching TV. This is not like a huge time break. But again, I look at my previous week, what was successful, what was not. I look more focused at the next 2 weeks of my calendar, and I do any tweaks and adjustments and prioritization. I also do a daily review. And again, this is just a quick glance at my calendar. I do it every day at the end of the day. And this lets people check out from what you've been doing for the day. So you look at your next day's calendar, you know what's on it, you've prioritized the things that you really want to focus on the next day, so that you can go into that day with a clear head and not kind of frazzled about thinking about what do I need to be working on. And then monthly, this is the one that I do book, and I put dedicated time every month. Sometimes I do it on the weekend before or after the first of the month. Sometimes I actually have time to do it actually on the 31st or the 1st. And this is the time that you want to pull out your to-do list, you want to pull out your calendar, and you want to go through this list. So there are probably things that have come up during the month, and if I've decided that I don't need to do them right away, I've added them to my backlog. There's things that I said I would do this month that aren't going to get done. And so rather than just pushing those forward, I'm actually going to add that to the backlog, and I'm going to look at it fresh and decide, okay, this month, how do I need to be spending my time? What are the things on this? And I'm going to go through my Ds. Can I delete anything? Can I defer anything? What are the things that I really need to focus on this next month? Can I digitize anything? I've noticed I'm spending a lot of time on a couple things, and I can make an investment there. Are there pieces that I can hand off and delegate? And so what is really the piece that I want to do? As you're doing this, again, you're going to want to look at how this last month went. We do not spend enough time acknowledging ourselves and celebrating all the work we do, particularly when we're working on bigger things that are incremental. So really take a moment and just acknowledge yourself and celebrate all the accomplishments that you had and the things that didn't go so great. This is an amazing learning experience. This is almost the most important part of this whole process, is what didn't go the way that I wanted it to. And so how do I calibrate my plan to saying, again, I came in the morning and I got distracted. So what are some ways that I can handle that? Do I not do that work in the morning? Are there other dedicated time blocks that I can do? Is there a way that I can unplug, before I get on anybody's radar? With people working from home, we have different levels of control over our schedule. And so that can be an area that you really help on. But that is a way to really start thinking about and keep growing and learning and really finding out what's going to work for you. And it might be a new opportunity to try something else. You're like, it's never worked for me to work out in the morning, but maybe I'll try it. and I'll see how it works. You can tell I'm focused on like, I need to start working out more. And so the last tip that I will give you in this area is time tracking. So this is really helpful for a lot of people. It's not something, some people do this all the time. There's this woman, I think Gretchen Rubin, who's like nuts about time tracking. She's got a good book on it. But it is really important to start looking at like, how am I actually spending my time? So I like to do it periodically in half-hour increments to just get a sense for really how I'm spending my days. Where am I miscalculating how I'm spending my time? So does the time that I'm spending, does this map to my goals and my values and how I want to be spending my time? Was I doing a bunch of stuff that wasn't on my list, but should be? And like, those are things that I was doing, but I just wasn't acknowledging those as the tasks that I had to do. And am I spending a lot of time doing something like social media that actually isn't something that I want to be spending a lot of time doing? And so I need to make a concerted effort to do that. And then also, how just generally was I about estimating my time and the amount of time that things were going to take and how I was going to be spending those? The author on that is Gretchen Rubin. Elizabeth, let me double check which book that is of hers, because there's two authors that I mix up, and it might be Laura Vannekamp that was doing it, but it is a great thing on really how we're spending our time and how we're doing our days. They're both great authors, so I'll give you both of their information. So as we're moving out of our Ds and as we're moving out of our maintenance, I am going to talk a little bit more about ways to connect with me, but I wanted to pause here and see if there were any questions and get a temperature check about what your biggest takeaways were. This is a question I like to ask, not only because I'm super curious as to what your biggest takeaways were, but scientifically, by you guys taking a minute and thinking about those pieces and thinking about which one thing you might want to take with you, just helps solidify it in your brain so that you'll remember it more. And so I would love if anybody wants to come off mic and share any of those pieces or share anything in the chat. I would love to hear any information on anything on the 5 Ds.
Sorry,
Victoria, go ahead.
Oh, I had forgotten all about the Pomodoro. I forgot all about that, and that really resonated. Oh, I should do that. And the gamification, I really like that. That will help me out too, I think, if I just say, okay, 25 minutes and, oh, I'll make a game out of it. And then rewarding, that's a big thing too.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I can have a piece of candy if I do this today, and then I'll do that. So,
right? Yeah, it's a great way to figure out those things that you really like to do. And so pairing those with something just makes it that much more rewarding to do those. I love those as tips. Good. I'm glad you got those. Does anybody else want to share? All right. Well, keep thinking about it and keep really thinking about, again, how you can start to incorporate this into your ways of thinking. So again, we've named them the 5 Ds so that it can be easier for you guys to remember, but it's really the process is spending my time in the most efficient way on the things that are the most important to me. Yeah, minimum and stretch goals. That's a great way to start thinking about pieces. I like to set myself up for success no matter what as I'm going into my weeks. And so sometimes it's just the minimum. Sometimes it's like, okay, if I spend 5 minutes going through that, then I'm moving forward on that goal, and those 5 minutes will add up. And so, yeah, when you need to make a major change to your plans, it's a big one. And so I think that one of the things about doing these planning techniques is really helpful is for me and for my clients, it really helps because you've really thought through everything that you're going to be doing through your time period. If something else comes up, you're just more prepared to shift that. So you're not wondering like, oh, I had a bunch of things that I thought I was going to be working on. You're like, no, I've got a concrete list of things that I was going to be working on. Something else came up. And so now I've got a concrete list that I can say like, okay, how do I move that stuff around? How do I make those adjustments now for that new information? And again, making sure that as you're moving forward with things, your schedule's not so jam-packed that you don't have a little flexibility is definitely always a tip that I have. Because I gotta tell you, there is at least one day every week where something comes up that I'm not planning. And suddenly I'm waylaid. You know, it might only be for an hour or two, it might be for the whole day, but suddenly I'm gonna have to shift my stuff around. And so it's easier now to take a look at my schedule and figure out like, okay, how do I shift those things around? What's really important? And I want to make sure I'm checking off with the small amount of time that I do have left. Hope that was a little helpful. All right, so if you are interested in hearing more from Dana Zellers, I wanted to give you a couple ways to stay in touch. So first off, you can join my mailing list. So I'm going to paste some links into the chat. And so with the mailing list, you get a free copy of my week planning guide. And so no surprise to everyone, I like to do regular week plans. And so that is one of the templates that I use to go through and just ask questions to myself as I'm going through each of those. And again, sometimes I do it more formally and sometimes not so much. But again, my mailing list is full of lots of tips and tricks, as well as other offers of things that are happening with me in the future. If you want to follow me on social, I've included the links to my LinkedIn and my Instagram. And thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing contact information as well. Again, most of my social handles are Dana_Zellers. And so depending on where you like to be, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok now. Apparently, I'm getting with the kids and we're going to do it. And then if you're interested in doing one-on-one coaching, I want to offer all of you a 30-minute complimentary consultation. So even if you're not serious about it and you just want to learn more and that you don't think it's something that's right for you, I would be happy to share information with you guys. And then I wanted to share my extra special offer. So normally my one-on-one coaching is 3 or 6 months, but a lot of my clients really want to focus on clarity. So they come in and they want to spend their time figuring out where they should be spending their time. What is the most important thing? What are their values? You know, as we're going through that list, what is their why? So that what is their North Star that they're coming back to? And so I've developed this boot camp, which is basically just 4 one-on-one meetings where we go through the steps that will get you that clarity. So we're going to do some reflection on your life. We're going to do some looking at what your values are and what's important to you. We're going to scope out your vision, and then we're going to figure out if there's just more information that you need to help clarify any of those pieces. And so those 4 steps are going to give you that package of feeling like you know where you want to be going to influence the choices that you're making today and the path that you're doing to move forward. And so, of course, a coach is a great way to put that plan in place as well. But again, I just wanted to give that opportunity. I am doing this special offer because it's something that I'm going to be turning into a group program. And so I'm really interested in people experiencing it and if they're satisfied, providing any testimonials. And so I wanted to give a special coupon $1 off on this to give you guys the ability to appreciate this little package. And so that's it. That is it for me. Again, I really want to thank Elizabeth for putting together these presentations and these opportunities to share with you guys. I'm so impressed with Breaking the Glass as an organization and the work that you do. And I thank you all for spending this time with me. As we all know, time is a precious commodity. And so I hope that everybody got a little something out of this.
Thank you. Little round of applause personally. That's one of the few things I miss about in-person events is the round of applause and being able to say hi and bye afterwards. But yeah, anyway, again, thank you all so much for joining. I know we wrapped up a little early, so kind of like part of the Pomodoro method. Is that how you say it?
Exactly. We got to give a break. Everybody's got to be able to have a break before their next meeting.
Yeah, have a little break. But if you're interested and you just want to turn your camera on real quick for a little group photo, I would love to just do a little LinkedIn post that you were here. Obviously, I know that not all of us were ready for that, but if you're interested in it, I'll take a screenshot in just a moment. Yeah.
Hey, Dana, you mentioned 2 authors. Gretchen and then the other one that you
Yeah, Gretchen Rubin and Laura Van Camp. And I follow both of them, and I apologize, but I get them mixed up sometimes. But I will double check those, and I'll get those authors and the books that I like to Elizabeth, as well as just notation of like the Pomodoro technique. Yeah, were there any other resources that I mentioned that I should follow up with?
I think that was really it. But yeah, we'll include those when we send out the email with the PDF of the slides. We'll have like those resources as well. So, you know, you're not getting like bombarded with too many pieces of information.
Great.
Great. Perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get this little screenshot real quick. Victoria, are you going to hang out and get this group photo with us? You're a little muted.
Oh, okay, yes.
All right. Perfect. All right. One. Oh, hey, Jean. All right. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate your spending the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone sign up for her course, or at least her complimentary session. I loved hanging out with her. It's a fun set, or we didn't do a session, but we've talked a lot, and it's always a good time.
Yeah, no, it's my favorite is just meeting with people and seeing where they're at and what's going on. So I'm always happy to do it.
All right,
Thank you
perfect.
for your time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jean.
Elizabeth, for putting it together.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Well, sounds good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and, well, Dana, I think you were the host, so you might have to be the one to officially close
right.
it down.
Well, I'm going to end it down, and then Elizabeth, I'll follow up with you.
All right, sounds good. All right,
All right, thanks, guys.
bye.